let's dive into one of history's most powerful warnings. It's the story of a king so mighty he was worshipped as a god, a man who truly believed his power was absolute. But he made one fatal mistake. He challenged a power far, far greater than his own. And in the end, the sea itself would deliver the final crushing judgment. Just listen to this claim from Pharaoh himself. I am your supreme lord. Now, in his kingdom, this wasn't just some arrogant boast. People believed it was a fact. And with those 4 words, the battle lines were drawn. It's the pinnacle of human arrogance colliding with an unstoppable divine force. And that collision? Well, that's what this entire story is all about. All right, so let's set the scene. Our story begins in an empire at the absolute height of its glory, ruled by a man whose power seemed completely unshakable. But just beneath that shiny golden surface of his confidence, a tiny crack of fear was about to appear, and it threatened to bring the whole thing crashing down. I want you to picture ancient Egypt, an empire of just staggering wealth, with palaces built as giant monuments to its own pride. But all of this grandeur, it was built on the backs of the enslaved Israelites. Their men were forced into brutal labor, and their women, they were spared only to give birth to the next generation of slaves. Think about it, a perfect, cruel, and totally unending cycle of oppression. So just when Pharaoh thinks he has it all figured out, his perfect world is shattered by a single terrifying dream. His mystics tell him it's a prophecy. A child born to his slaves will be his downfall. Now watch how quickly that fear spirals into pure tyranny. Does he stop and think? Nope. His response is just raw, unbelievable brutality, a decree to murder every single newborn Israelite son. But you know, destiny has a funny way of ignoring even the most powerful kings. Right in the middle of all this terror, the prophesied child is born. And get this, in an absolutely stunning twist of fate, his journey won't begin in the slave quarters. It's going to start inside the very walls of the palace, under the roof of the same man who wants him dead. So imagine you're Moses' mother. You're faced with this absolutely impossible choice. Every fiber of your being is screaming to hide your son, to protect him. But then she gets this divine instruction that just seems to defy all logic. Put him in a basket and set him adrift on the river. I mean, talk about an unimaginable act of faith, right? All of it fueled by just one single divine promise. We will return him to you. And this is where the irony just gets so thick you could cut it with a knife. The river carries that basket, not to some safe hidden place, but directly into the heart of danger, Pharaoh's own palace. And as his guards move in to carry out his monstrous decree, it's Pharaoh's own wife, Asira, whose heart is suddenly filled with compassion. She steps in, and with that one act of mercy, she unknowingly saves the very child destined to destroy her husband's kingdom. Okay, so fast forward a bit. The child, Moses, grows up as a prince of Egypt. But as you can guess, his destiny isn't going to be found inside those comfortable palace walls. A series of events is about to force him out of his home and set him on a completely new path, the path to becoming a prophet. So how does he go from prince to prophet? Well, it all starts with an act of justice. He sees an Egyptian brutalizing one of his people, and he steps in, killing the oppressor. And just like that, the prince becomes a fugitive, running for his very life. For years, he lives as a humble shepherd, a world away from the luxury he grew up with. And it's right there, in the quiet solitude of the desert, that he finally receives the divine call from a burning bush. And the command he gets from God, it's simple. And it is absolutely terrifying. Go to Pharaoh. Go back to the country you fled from. Go back and confront the very man who has a death sentence on your head. The shepherd now has to return as a prophet to face the king. And so he does. He walks right back into that royal court, his brother Aaron by his side. And you have to understand, this isn't a negotiation. This is a head-on confrontation between two completely opposing claims to power. And really, the entire conflict just boils down to this one single exchange. Pharaoh, this self-proclaimed God on earth, demands, "And who is this Lord of yours?" Moses' answer isn't just a comeback. It's a direct challenge to Pharaoh's entire identity. Right there, the battle lines are drawn. This isn't about swords, it's about ego versus faith. So Pharaoh, he's not impressed. He's like, "Oh yeah, watch this." And he calls in his best magicians for a showdown. They throw down their ropes, and through some kind of trickery, they look like snakes. But then Moses throws down his staff, and it becomes a real serpent, which then eats all of their illusions. And the magicians, they get it instantly. They recognize a power that completely dwarfs their own, and they fall to the ground in submission, right there in front of a furious Pharaoh. But Pharaoh's heart, it just gets harder. And so, the warnings just keep getting worse and worse. A series of absolutely devastating plagues are unleashed on Egypt. You're talking destructive storms, swarms of locusts that eat everything, infestations of lice, hordes of frogs, until the very lifeblood of the empire, the Nile River, turns to blood. And you see this pattern, right? With every single plague, he begs for it to stop, he promises to give in, but the second he gets relief, his pride just hardens his heart all over again. Okay, so finally, after the last and most terrible plague, the final command is given. The time for warnings is officially over. The moment of liberation has finally arrived. So under the cover of darkness, Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt. They're finally leaving centuries of slavery behind them. But when morning comes and Pharaoh discovers his entire slave workforce has just vanished, you think he'd learn, right? But no. His rage and his arrogance just explode for one last fatal chase. He will not be defeated. He's going to drag them back. And all of this leads us to the massive, dramatic climax of the entire story. The fleeing Israelites and the pursuing Egyptian army all meet at the edge of the Red Sea. I mean, really, just try to put yourself there for a second. In front of you is a deep, impossible sea. And behind you, you can hear the thunder of hooves and see the dust cloud of the world's most powerful army. And they are closing in for the kill. There is literally nowhere to run. It's the definition of a hopeless trap. So you've got his people, understandably, crying out in total terror. They're sure they've just been led to their doom. But while they see only death, Moses sees salvation. His faith is like an unshakable anchor in this storm of panic, and he tells them with absolute certainty, "My Lord is with me. He will make a way." And then the divine command comes, strike the sea. Moses obeys, and the impossible happens. The Red Sea parts, creating a dry path with these massive walls of water on either side. The Israelites scramble across, and here is where Pharaoh makes his final, fatal mistake. He's so blinded by his rage that he doesn't see a miracle. He just sees a path, and he orders his army to charge straight into the trap. The second the last Israelite is safely across, the walls of water collapse. As the sea crashes down, crushing his chariots and drowning his army, Pharaoh finally gets it. He finally sees the truth, and in his last moments, he cries out a declaration of faith. But it's too late. Way, way too late. But Pharaoh's story doesn't actually end there at the bottom of the sea, because there's one last, chilling part to the story. A final decree's made. His body will not be lost to the depths. It will be preserved. But not as an act of mercy. It's for a whole other purpose. And that's the whole point, really. It brings us to this key idea called ibrat. It means a lesson, an example to learn from, a permanent warning sign. You see, Pharaoh's preserved body wasn't a prize for him. It was a sign for us. It was meant to be a physical, tangible reminder for all future generations of the fate that waits for anyone who, in their arrogance, declares themselves a god. And so, at the end of the day, the story leaves you with a pretty timeless question. From that tyrant's fearful dream all the way to a body preserved as a permanent lesson, this whole saga serves as the answer. It's a stark reminder that no matter how great your empire, how vast your army, or how absolute you think your power is, human pride has a final, inevitable destination when it stands against the divine.